Hi, my name is Bernadette, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are bringing back our very first guest ever on The Out Entrepreneur, Bernadette Smith, who is calling all the way from the Windy City, Chicago. So Bernadette, are you ready to inspire Out Bosses again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, well, thanks for being on the show again. You are continue to be one of the most popular episodes. So I'm excited by some of the changes that we've made with the show. And I'm really excited to hear about some of the changes you're making in business today. So just as a reminder for folks who haven't tuned into the very first episode, Bernadette is the founder and president of the Equality Institute. And she's an award-winning author of 3 books. And she really did help us kick off the inaugural episode of The Out Entrepreneur. So again, thank you for being back to the show. Thank you for being a friend of the show, Bernadette. So it's been well over a year since our first episode. And I'm curious right now, what's changed in your business since the last time we chatted?
So much. I just looked back on my calendar to see when we first chatted. I think we did that first interview over a year and a half ago. So a lot's changed. I've changed. So I think back then, I was still getting my grounding, trying to move my business away from the world of LGBT weddings, which was my foundation and how I got started 14 years ago, and trying to shift into some other things. So the shifting is still ongoing. But one of the things that I've very recently, like this week or last week, really truly embraced is, you know what? I will always be involved in this world of LGBT weddings because it was just my beginning. I wrote 3 books on it. I still get called to speak and talk about it. And I can't really escape it. And I should stop trying to and just allow that to be more of my story than I often have been sharing. And so embracing it all has been my new level of acceptance.
I really like that. And I've been thinking a lot lately around blending, blending superpowers, blending the things that I really love doing in business and trying to break out of that mindset of like, oh, this business must be this way and being super rigid around that. And can you walk us through some of the challenges for you where when you started the Equality Institute, you had an idea of like, okay, these are the things I'm going to do. I'm saying goodbye to doing all of the LGBT specific wedding work that I've done in the past. And now maybe you've gone full circle and you've come back to the LGBT wedding piece to say, wait, it does fit in. And so maybe walk us through where you were 16 months ago and how you've returned to embracing the LGBT wedding aspects of the work that you do.
Well, I think part of it is that I had this perception that corporate America, as I was selling these other trainings and consulting services, that corporate America would perceive all of the wedding work that I had done as shallow or irrelevant or who does she think she is? So it's all about limiting beliefs. It's about being afraid of what others thought that led me to have this fear of really fully being authentic or embracing all parts of who I am. So that was definitely, it was all about limiting beliefs. And I think recently, especially because I just got a new contract to manage all of the LGBT wedding work of a brand new, still under construction hotel in Mexico.
Whoa, congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah.
I wish we had applause right now or something on the show. Yeah.
Thank you. And this is from a contact from, 6 years ago.
Wow.
That, I sort of had kept in a little bit of touch with on LinkedIn and stuff, and it came back around. And so it's like, all right, well, the universe is telling me something. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is just listening to the signs, listening to what's happening, and not being afraid of what other people think. I think another limiting belief I had was that people are going to think I'm a flake, that I'm scattered, that I'm all over the place if I'm still doing weddings while I'm doing consulting, if I'm still doing the LGBT wedding training while I'm trying to sell training for banks, so I had to let all of that go. Just embrace it all. Doesn't matter. All of these are related. They're all part of sending the same message to the world. And it's okay to own them all and I guess fully embrace all of myself. It's funny, the things that we can teach others about sometimes struggle with ourselves.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. I mean, it's kind of like, and I've shared this on the show before, where it's sometimes, well, for myself, it's definitely easier to help other people and to always give, give, give. And then when I get stuck, it's like, oh wait, I have to ask other people for help. So I think that that's totally right on, where it's sometimes it's harder to think how to best position your business or how to talk about it, especially when you're thinking about, like what you were saying, that perception piece, this idea that colleagues or potential clients may think that you're scattered and all over the place. And the reality is, like, they're attracted to you for something that they think that you're offering, and that in that they know that you can solve a problem that they're having. And so this relationship that you cultivated for 6 years all of a sudden is like, wait, Bernadette, you're doing LGBT wedding specific stuff. We need you to help solve this problem for a hotel in Mexico. And boom, you've got this amazing contract. And it definitely builds in the great work that you're doing through the Equality Institute, right? And this is just like another area of your expertise. And I think that blend is hard. I think it's hard when you're getting started in a business and you think you're going to go in a certain direction, and you carry with yourself all of those experiences that you've had from previous jobs or previous businesses. And I think what you're doing is, I mean, it's a real challenge for a lot of us. And so I hope your story is helping some of those of us who are on the path of blending all of our superpowers to create these really cool businesses that align with how we want to live our lives. And so looking at your business right now, as compared to where it was 16 months ago, what's that one thing right now that it's lighting you up and you feel like you're able to solve a common problem that you're seeing in businesses that you're working with?
Well, one thing that I've started working on recently is a new speech, essentially, or workshop that addresses the blurred lines of communication problems. And this is a direct response in part to the Me Too, #MeToo movement. Essentially, it's a workshop or a talk about communication skills. In so many cases in workplaces, we see colleagues or coworkers, and it doesn't even have to be in workplaces, could be at conferences or whatever, where there's a touch or a comment which could be perceived as innocent to one and harassment to the other. And there's lots of blurred lines that can cause #MeToo, right? And so the talk addresses that, and it ties it to the assumptions we make about others. It ties it to unconscious bias and how we put people in boxes. And I think it's all related. So I'm really excited about talking about communication skills more broadly, talking about unassuming assumptions, because that's also related to so much that I've been speaking about for years with the heterosexism and the heteronormativity of the wedding industry. So it's actually all related to the assumptions we make about gender and sexuality.
Share more with the audience around this, because I know offline we've chatted about it. And I think you're adding a whole new dimension to the Me Too conversation. And I think what you're doing is, I think you're onto something really fantastic and absolutely needed. So can you just share a little bit more, or whatever you feel comfortable, because I know you're still developing the talk, around what some of these assumptions look like in conversations around gender? I think that would be helpful for some of the folks who tune into the show.
Yeah, I think that there are some common things that come up, let's say, with a gay man and a straight cis female coworker, where she thinks just because he's a gay man, she can make sexual innuendos around him, or talk sexually provocative about other men or women, or and basically have a more sexual conversation with a coworker specifically because he's gay. Are the rules different because he's gay? So that's just one example of some of the things that come up. I mean, there's so many stories that I've heard in my research for this talk, and it's been absolutely shocking, the kinds of conversations that people think they can get away with. Female coworkers making a comment about the size of a guy's penis they can see through his pants. Now, I mean, everyone does it. Everyone has a story like this. Accidental touching of a breast during a job interview or during a meeting. Is it accidental? Is it not? So it can be blamed or written off. And this all connects with assumptions, because we think that people are on our same page, or we are putting them into a box related to their gender or their sexuality. And we think that because this gay guy is someone that we can have a fun time at work with, that we can then put him in this box of, gay best friend, and sexual talk at work. So it's instances like that and so many assumptions that all tie together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you're speaking to, it just reminds me of, like you said, everyone kind of has a story. And it reminds me, I was working for an LGBT advocacy organization, right? So you would think that there would be some more nuance around how this type of sexual harassment or discriminatory behavior shows up in the workplace. And similar to the example that you gave, where a number of cisgender straight women were commenting on the bodies of gay cisgender men in the workplace. And it got so bad that fortunately we were able to talk through. It was a small staff, and there was actually policy and training that was developed around it, and just raising awareness around what was acceptable and shining a light, like you said, adding some more tools to have skillful conversations around what's appropriate in the workplace and what's not. Even, common sense is like, probably shouldn't be doing this. And yet it still happens, and it's happening everywhere. It was happening in an LGBT advocacy organization. So thank you for kind of walking through a few of those examples. I think it's definitely helpful. And I know that Winter Talk is ready, TED Talk, wherever it goes, we'll definitely be sharing links, because I think it's going to be helpful for the audience, especially for bosses who are trying to build their own business cultures that are mindful of these things and making sure that they don't replicate what's happening in a lot of workplaces across the country and around the world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And one more thing is that this is a talk for everybody. It's a talk for every industry or even perpetrator. I don't even want to use the word perpetrator. It's not about blaming. It's about the assumptions we make, and everyone is guilty of them. And it actually, in my talk, I give an example from my second adolescence when I first came out at college, and a move I made, because I had no game, but a move I made on someone as I was, essentially discovering how to flirt, and how that was interpreted. So every one of us has some sort of story. So it's really relatable.
So you're talking about pulling together this TED style talk for everyone. And I just wanted to take a step back and kind of look at your business. And speaking has always been a part of your business. And I feel like this year in particular, it seems like you're really ramping up your game, right? And trying to get out there more, to get your message out to more audiences who can benefit from it. Could you share with our audience, like, just what that looks like in terms of, I'm just thinking of, this is the 77th episode. For 76 bosses, including yourself, right? Everyone has this area of expertise, and they might be doing it through consulting or coaching. Where does the speaking part come in, and how can that actually be an additional revenue stream for a business? And would you recommend it for a lot of business owners, or does it take a special kind of person to do it? Just walk through that focus that you have on speaking and how it helps your own business.
Sure. This is a relatively new aha moment for me, because I've been doing speaking and training for years, many, many years, about LGBT weddings. About 6 years ago or so, I was in Mexico speaking at a conference in Guadalajara with this gentleman who was a marketing expert, and he spoke about marketing. And of course, I spoke about LGBT weddings on the big stage, and it was great. He and I kept in touch and reconnected few months ago, at which point he said, "Bernadette, the more you talk, the less you earn, the more you speak." He essentially was saying, if you market yourself as a trainer rather than a speaker, you're going to lose earning potential. So companies are more willing to pay for speakers than they are for trainers, which is counterintuitive, but it's true.
Yeah.
And so he and his business manager actually taught me a lot about the business of pitching speeches, talks, keynotes to associations, to corporations. So I've been doing an awful lot of pitching lately. It means having a demo reel. It means sending out brochures and pitch emails. It is not a fun process. And you really have to have a system in place if you're willing to make it a business. So really having a system in place for, when do I send the pitch emails? When do I do the follow-ups? What do I put in the mail? All of that, etc., is definitely a huge part of it. And then, of course, you have to be really comfortable owning the stage and knowing that your audience is not going to want to be lectured to. And how is it that you can have, in my case, talking about a potentially sensitive subject without making anyone feel blamed or judged, and have it be somehow inspirational and motivational, so that I can actually sell it as a keynote, as an opening or closing speech at an event. So it's really about framing all of it, framing your talk in that way, and then also having the structure in place to pitch. And, as we've probably talked about before, no matter what your craft is as an entrepreneur, if you can't sell, then you don't have a business. And so I spend a large percentage of my time selling or building connections, networking. And it's just the way it is. It's the name of the game.
Yeah, you dropped a lot of knowledge bombs there. And I'd say one of the biggest pieces, and you share this with me separately, is just kind of the more that you talk, the less that you earn. And I think that's really helpful. And since learning that from you, I've shared that with a couple of folks in a local mastermind that I'm a part of. And that was like a real epiphany for a lot of people who see themselves as facilitators. A couple of the folks in the group have PhDs and they're like, oh my God, you're right. So I think the person that you met in Guadalajara, he was onto something because that's real. And so that's just kind of food for thought for people tuning into the show. And I like what you had said around creating systems and processes. If speaking is something that lights you up and you feel like you do motivate, inspire people with your story, whatever that might be, that they're, behind the scenes, there's a lot involved in making sure that you can continue to get your message out. And so, like you said, the demo reels and your process of connecting with meeting planners or whoever the people are that make these decisions, whether it's at a corporation or university or college, these are some things to think through. A couple of resources, one of which is Dory Clark, who's a friend of the show, wrote a book recently called Entrepreneurial You. And in that book, she talks a lot about adding different revenue streams to your business. And because she is a speaker as well, she talks a lot about how to add this aspect to your business if you haven't thought about it already. And I think there's some valuable information in there. For you, Bernadette, you've been speaking for a long time. Is that just something that totally comes natural for you, or has it been a craft that you have just perfected over time because you know that you have a story, you have a message to share, and it, despite like maybe having stage fright, you're going to do it. Like where do you kind of land in how natural public speaking comes to you, and what might be some tips that you could share for folks who they're not quite ready to do a TED style talk yet?
Sure. Yeah, I love public speaking. It's always been very natural to me. I think in my heart, I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I love sharing information with others and helping others grow, whether it's on a stage or one-on-one. Like I said, my background is more of a trainer than a speaker. So even when I've gotten paid to come and stand on a stage and speak in the past, it's mostly been me up there killing it, but with a PowerPoint, and relying pretty heavily on that. And as I've been shifting, it's sort of making me think about, okay, how do I cut down my slides to, 6? What can I say in 6 slides to have some visual interest in the background? And also really practicing things like storytelling, vulnerability, elements like that. And realizing that when I'm doing a training or when I'm doing a workshop, I do add lots of elements that are interactive, but when I'm on stage, I don't really have that luxury. So how can I keep things interesting, appeal to all different types of learning styles while on stage without being really interactive? So all of those things are considerations for me. I've been working on this blurred lines talk since January or so, but back in September, I actually joined one of the local Toastmasters groups here in Chicago. Even though I have a lot of experience, it's been really, really fun being a part of that group. And there's always things to learn and skills to build. And it's given me an opportunity, especially to practice speaking about things which are not work related. So I have told family stories. I did a talk on how to make a perfect martini, so I've had a really fun time doing Toastmasters talks and getting myself out of sort of my work comfort zone.
Yeah, the recommendation for Toastmasters, right? I mean, public speaking, obviously it comes so natural to you, right? And yet you want to grow. You can see other speakers and you want to add to the skills that you've already kind of perfected over time. And Toastmasters is one of those resources that's available probably in most cities across the country.
It's in 140 countries, actually.
Boom, worldwide. Okay, so no excuses. If you feel like you have something important to say, even if you're quiet and an introvert, step outside of your comfort zone. That's what, building building a business is all about, and consider those resources. One other person that comes to mind is Michael Port, who has a kind of a whole business around helping people speak and sharing their stories in front of the audience. And he also has a podcast. And one of the things that I find really valuable from that is just like what you were saying around how to, I mean, for him, he doesn't believe in slides at all, which for me, like as someone who is a facilitator, I'm like, oh my God, there's no visual. And yet he really helps speakers or soon to be speakers think about their stories, like you said, getting vulnerable and using the stage, different points on the stage to deliver certain elements of a speech. To have like a really pivotal part of a speech, you go kind of stage right, and the things that and I think that's really fascinating of just like how you can use your body to continue keeping the audience attention. And I think the challenge that any speaker has when they're keynoting is, like you said, you have to motivate, you have to inspire. And so it's almost like edutainment in a way where you're sharing your point and you're getting people excited and you're delivering, like you said, you're an educator. And so I'm curious for you, like when you're up on the stage or, when you're thinking about your strategy in speaking, you might be talking about blurred lines, right? Obviously, there's a marketing component to what you're doing. How do you then engage an audience to take an action that you want them to learn more about your business, or even better, like you said, almost like selling from the stage without selling? Like, how do you bring them into your business's sales funnel?
Well, in a situation like that, where if I'm doing like a keynote type talk, I'm not really allowed to sell. It's not even an option. In some cases, if I'm speaking at a conference in a workshop room, a lot of times the contract says you can't make an offer as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind. In a situation where I can make an offer, usually I will offer a free download. So in the many cases in which I've spoken about LGBT weddings and travel, I offer, a free tip sheet if you go to my website, or I offer a raffle of one of my books. If I collect business cards and everyone gives me their business card, I'll do a raffle. And then, of course, I have emails which I can then send follow-up notes so that they have that as well as a resource and they know that I'm a resource. For Quality Institute stuff, I offer a 1-hour coaching call or a 1-hour consulting call for people who give me their business card. I also have a download on my website. Those are some of the things that I've done. But actually, I think that forget about the sales funnel, because I think what's more important is that people actually take action in their own lives or in their professional lives because of what they've heard me say.
Nice.
It's thinking about what are the changes they're going to make? How do I make this seem easy for them? How do I give takeaways that are memorable? How do I speak to different learning styles? So some people want one key takeaway. Some people want specific stories and specific data that's going to prove it. And that's going to be how they make the change. Some people want to know why they should listen to me. So I have to prove all of that stuff and then try to give takeaways that people actually implement. So there's a lot that's at play. And one other thing I want to, since you mentioned Michael Port, I think he gives the advice that speakers or prospective speakers should watch some stand-up comic routines on stage and analyze how the comics use the stage, professional stand-ups, because there's a lot that speakers can learn from stand-ups about the use of stage, when to sit, when to stand, when to walk stage left, stage right, posture, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I mean, these are folks that are trying to get a laugh out of people, which is really hard. It's super, super hard. So definitely masters of their craft for sure. And I think what you were saying around, for you, I mean, it sounds like, and if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me, but it sounds like for you, like what's lighting you up to get in front of the stage isn't necessarily making a sale, because most of the contracts probably prohibit you from doing so. For you, it sounds like it's really inspiring people to make that change in their life, right? So if it's around blurring the lines around assumptions, is just like being aware of your own unconscious biases or whatever the thing is that you're talking about, like it's for you, it's having that change. Maybe for some of the folks listening to the show who probably could see themselves delivering keynotes related to their areas of expertise. So for the more skeptical folks where it's like, if I'm not making an immediate sale or it's not leading to something, it's not worth my time. What would you say to those people around the value of speaking and how it has helped your business in ways that you didn't expect?
Yeah, it's priceless because I think people buy from who they know, love, and trust, right? I mean, that's fairly well established. And one of the ways to become someone that people know is to get in front of them and to speak. And that also establishes trust. Mm-hmm. So I think you really can rapidly establish yourself as an expert if you are willing to be brave enough to get in front of the room. And I think also it just opens up everything. It opens up all of the doors. I have so many, besides Google AdWords, probably the single most successful way I've built my business is from speaking. Mm-hmm. And Google AdWords is number one. But number two is really getting in front of people and then having people say, okay, I know someone who would really love to have you, or we need to have you at my company. That's really how it all works.
Yeah. I think that like, know, and trust piece is super, super valuable. And I wanted to circle back on something that you had shared before around the essential nature of selling and sales. And what are some things that you've noticed, and you've been an entrepreneur for, I don't have your bio, 14 years?
14 years.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you know some things about sales, right? And so this is a piece that pops up for people that I'm in touch with who are just getting started, and the sales and the marketing piece are the challenge. What might be some advice that you would give to folks really, still they're thinking about taking the leap, and there's some fear around, where do I find my ideal customers? How do I sell to them? Like, what might you say to those folks just getting started to move beyond that specific fear?
Well, probably the first thing to do, if you haven't already done it, is to very much dig in, super niche. Who is your ideal customer? Define them very carefully, and then try to get into their head. How do these people buy? Where do they shop? Where do they go? Where do they network? How do I connect with these people? And I think that's really number one. And then once you have a sense of that, I think you can really better refine your marketing strategy. So for me, thinking about selling consulting and speaking to corporations, and I'm not talking about the Me Too stuff. Let's just talk about LGBT customer service and unconscious bias training. Thinking about that, where do I connect with decision makers at companies who would have any interest in bringing me in? Okay, so sometimes that means showing up for D&I events locally here in Chicago, or getting myself involved in leadership positions in organizations that have a D&I angle to them, or getting myself involved in events, volunteering to speak at some of these things, getting myself invited to a panel discussion. But all of this is, again, coming back to being seen, being in front of people. So the people who would even consider hiring me for these types of things are people who would probably find me by meeting me in person somewhere at some type of an event, probably an educational event that they're attending because of work. And so for me, then it's thinking, okay, well, in that case, should I be spending any time at all on Instagram or Pinterest? Probably not, right? Mm-hmm. So once you sort of get in the mindset of how your ideal customer could be buying and where they're looking for services, then it becomes a little bit easier to focus.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, and your approach is working. You're in front of people. You're in front of people at conferences and events. You're serving in leadership positions. You're volunteering to speak sometimes just from the stage, sharing your advice. And I think in those instances, you're really refining who you are, like what your expertise is, and how you can help your ideal customers. And I think that's just like a helpful reminder. I know we've chatted about this with the audience, in several episodes of the show already. Even repeating it over and over, I don't think that we can repeat it enough. And so thank you for just kind of walking through how you view the value of speaking and how that can help with your sales and marketing. What we didn't get to cover the first time we had you on the show is kind of jumping into the boss mindset of being an out entrepreneur, and in particular, just owning the space of your industry and what your business does. And since we're talking about speaking, and this is like a big core aspect of your business, when you first got started, even though you love speaking and it probably comes really natural to you, did you have any kind of feelings of imposter complex, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, where maybe the first time you got up on stage, you had a feeling of like, who am I? I'm not ready to do this yet. I don't have enough experience. Like, did those feelings pop up for you? And if they did, how did you work around them in those kind of first few years when you were doing public speaking?
It's a great question. And I can tell you that when I first started public speaking about LGBT weddings, I felt like $1,000,000. There was no imposter complex
Nice.
at all because I felt like I had earned it. I mean,
Yeah.
I had started this company, I had written books, like I felt great being up there. Very, very, very few fears, very few hesitations. However, as I shifted and I started talking more about LGBT customer service more broadly, customer service and concerns of transgender and non-binary customers and colleagues, and now talking about hashtag #MeToo stuff and blurred lines, I've had imposter syndrome hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to really work through some limiting beliefs about all of that and identify those limiting beliefs and let them rise to the surface and then put together some tools to fight them. So one of my limiting beliefs is, will I be taken seriously if I'm not, quote unquote, like a victim or a sufferer or, diverse enough or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so will I be taken seriously? Does my voice matter? And that question really held me back from perhaps writing as much as I could have or putting myself out there as much as I could have, because I didn't want anyone to say, who are you to talk about this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, even saying it now is liberating to let it all out.
Yes.
but one of the ways I've sort of counteracted this limiting belief is by reminding myself that some people find themselves being more affected by hearing from allies. Allies are incredibly important and incredibly effective, and our voices mean a lot. In some cases, they might have a bigger impact because it essentially erases some fear about being judged
Mm-hmm.
or about being blamed. Anyway, so that's one of the ways I've sort of counteracted that limiting belief and that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So when these kind of limiting beliefs arise for you, just like the ability of shining a light and acknowledging they're there and you can name them, maybe it takes away some of the power, it sounds like. And I think that that's really key. And remembering that your voice does matter. I think in the work that you're doing, you wouldn't be doing this work if it didn't, right? And so I think that's really helpful advice for the audience. When limiting beliefs do arise, go ahead and confront them and kind of sit with them and figure out. We had a guest on the show a while back, Jaden Love, who's like, I like to acknowledge that they're there and try to become friends with these thoughts and work with them in that way. I think that that's real. These thoughts, they never go away, right? They can be your frenemies, I guess, is what I would call them. And so when they show up, when you're in your business and you have a feeling of self-doubt or you've encountered a problem and you're trying to get around it, and you start to hear these voices again with the limiting beliefs, what do you do in those moments just to kind of say, oh, there they are, and here's this problem, and I feel like I don't want to do anything? Like, how do you get around that?
Great question. So there are a couple of ways. One of them is to embrace my word of the year. So this year, my word of the year is lead. So to step into my power as a leader in other industries, not just the wedding industry. And so to really take on leadership. And if I'm willing to be a leader, then my voice is powerful. And if I fail to lead, then I'm missing an opportunity to change the world, right? So it's really pushing past those limiting beliefs and stepping into my power as a leader by reminding myself of that word of the year. The other thing is setting an intention for the day. So when I meditate every morning, I set my intention for the day and really use that as a way to guide me and focus. And that usually means pushing past limiting beliefs. And then finally, I just did this exercise very recently because as I've been working on some new projects, I realized that I have all these new limiting beliefs. So I came up with about 10 more. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I felt so weighed down by all this baggage. I'm like, I cannot believe there's all this new stuff hovering over me.
Yeah.
But I let it out to the surface. And then I put together these cards, which are my counter cards. They essentially counteract my limiting beliefs. Some of them are client testimonials. Some of them are affirmations. Some of them are essentially the truth about you. So there's all these different cards I made up. I made up 30 cards.
Whoa.
So I laminated them, and
That's
now
so
they're
cool.
in my office, so I can sort of shuffle through, read some cards, and it really does help me push through the limiting beliefs. And by the way, that my friend Leisha McCoy, who's an actor in New York, came up with that idea. So I stole that from her.
All right. Well, thank you, Leisha, for those card ideas. I think that's super valuable. It sounds like she has like a whole business behind that if she wanted to, because I feel like I would, yeah, I love that. So maybe I'll try that. That sounds great.
They're really cool.
I love what you had said around your word of the year, and this year for you is leadership, and what you had said, if you fail to lead, what is this? That you miss an opportunity to change the world, right? And so just kind of stepping up, even if it's, I was talking about this earlier, the WTF, like willingness to fail, like that's just going to give you more information. Even if you do fail in some instance, you had the courage to step up, you learned something from it, and you're still on point, you're still on purpose and doing what you're trying to do, which is making the world a little bit better for all of us. Super, super valuable steps and advice there. So I think what we're going to do right now is we're going to go to a quick sponsorship break. And when we come back, we're going to learn more about where Bernadette is at right now with her business. What does it look like for you to be the true leader, the outboss you know you can be? That's a question David DiGiorgio, friend of the show, takes seriously. He is on a mission to empower high achievers, outbosses, to become visionary leaders and speakers. In his upcoming book, Being Unapologetic, David shares his story of being severely bullied in school and how he's used that as the foundation for his success and is now on a mission to support you in sharing your message and voice with the world. When you pre-order the special, limited edition, not only will a portion of your purchase support a high school performing arts program, you and your story will be featured to inspire others. You're ready to be unapologetic now. To learn more, visit outboss.beingunapologetic.com. Again, that's outboss.beingunapologetic.com. All right. So welcome back to the show. We are now going into a modified bonus round where we're going to get to know Bernadette a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way to stay in touch with Bernadette after today's conversation. All right, Bernadette, you've been through the quickfire round before, so are you ready to go again?
Sure, bring it on.
Okay. What's one lesson that you've learned over the past 16 months that surprised you and has actually helped advance your business?
Oh my goodness. All of the lessons. The one thing that I learned was just a lot more mindset tools. I mean, I've had some and I keep expanding my tool bag of mindset stuff. But one thing I do is if there's something that's really holding me back, like a limiting belief or something else that's really bogging me down, I write a letter to myself and then I burn it and ritually let it go. And it really does help. So it could be something family related from past or whatever. It's really a ritualistic letting go of an anchor that's weighing me down.
Nice. I really like that. So the last time we chatted, I asked you about what's one thing that you delegate in your business. And I'm sure there's many things. And I think the last time you were talking about social media. So beyond the social media, because that's a headache for all of us, are there other things right now, maybe systems that you've set up over the past 16 months that have allowed you to do more of thinking about the next talk that you're going to do or having more time to work with a client?
Yeah, all of the conference research that I've needed to have as I pitch out this new concept, this new talk, that's research that's arduous. So I've been having a virtual assistant do all that research, putting it in spreadsheets with contacts and all of that. So that's certainly been really, really helpful.
Nice. Yeah. Just kind of managing contacts alone can be a lot, and you're in a lot of places. So you're gaining more and more contacts all the time. So just having a system in place is really helpful there. We also talked the last time about personal habits that just help you show up and be a stronger boss. I'm curious, with the meditation, you shared a little bit around coming up with an intention every time you sit down and meditate. Can you share a little bit more just about your meditation practice? Because this is one of the responses that comes up a lot for this question. This is probably not a quick fire question, but I'm just curious. So hopefully the rest of the audience is as well. How do you structure your meditation so you show up every day and do it?
Sure. So first of all, I meditate on weekdays only or work days only. I meditate in the morning. And actually for the past week, I just started journaling before I meditate. So I get out of bed and I journal for 5 or 10 minutes, reflecting on the day before and then reflecting on the current day. So I have a lot of that stuff already downloaded from my mind. And then I sit and meditate. So when I first started to meditate, I tried a bunch of apps. Nothing really stuck. I was always giving myself a hard time, feeling like I wasn't doing it right. Like what I learned from the app One Giant Mind, which was the app that taught me to meditate, is that there is no bad meditation. So just sort of embrace it all. If your mind gets cluttered with thoughts, just let them go. Just release them, but don't judge yourself for it.
Yeah.
Once I sort of got in the habit of meditating, I then switched to Insight Timer.
Yes.
So I usually use Insight Timer every morning. Although for the past 6 months or so, I have been also learning or practicing Spanish with a language exchange buddy. We practice, I help her with English. She helps me with Spanish. We meet a couple times a week on FaceTime.
Wow, that's cool.
So one of the things that I have started doing in the past month or so is about 3 or 4 days of the week, instead of using Insight Timer, I listen to a guided meditation in Spanish.
Whoa. Yeah, that's the best way to learn, right?
Yeah. So I don't know that I'm like paying all that much attention to the words, but just sort of having it in the background is a way to learn. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. And so for the past 16 months, do you feel like you've been able to kind of like stick to that schedule of meditation?
Yeah, very consistently. Even when I travel for work, when I'm in a hotel, it's very, very consistent.
Nice.
It's a priority.
Yeah. I think it's really helpful. It's a response that a lot of bosses have brought up on the show. And so maybe we'll have some more shows dedicated to just how that helps all of us be better at what we do every day, to be more intentional and to use our time, our very, very limited time, to the best that we can. Okay, so a couple more questions, just 3. And the first is, since we last talked, has there been a book that you've read that you think would be really helpful to business owners in general, and especially our audience, LGBT business owners, just to be more authentic, to do our work well, to do it with purpose? I know you read a ton, so anything that pops up comes to mind that might be helpful for us?
Well, that's a hard question, honestly, because mostly what I've been reading has been fiction to sort of declutter my brain as an escape. Yeah. I did read Dory Clark's book, Stand Out, last year, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed what she has to say. I haven't read any of her other books, but I thought that one was really great. I also enjoyed James Nolan's book, The Purposeful Millionaire. There are some things in that book that I really took out of it as well, including my morning exercise routine. So
nice.
I think that in every book you can hopefully find 1 or 2 gems that become part of your life. And that's my goal.
Yeah. Really great recommendations. And your response around the fiction piece reminds me of Genesis Fisher, who was on the show. And that was her response too. She's like, I'm like immersed in business all the time. I want an outlet, and it's through reading fiction. So I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So right now, I know that you've shared advice around how LGBT entrepreneurs can take that first step. Any other advice since 16 months ago that you might give to someone who is LGBT? They might still be working for someone else and they really want to take that first step. What might be some additional advice that you would give them? Find
your tribe, find your network, find support team. I mean, you and I are in the same mastermind group and we can bounce ideas off of each other. And being an entrepreneur can be very isolating. So finding people with whom you can have connections with, you can commiserate with, you can get feedback on your ideas, whether it's an online Facebook group or friends or some sort of mastermind group. Don't isolate yourself.
Yeah.
You'll find that as you talk to more and more people, that many of the feelings you have are familiar. Find a community.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that that's super wonderful advice. And I'm really grateful for the mastermind that we're a part of it gives me life in a lot of ways. And I get sad when I miss them. So yeah, so be consistent with that. Okay. So before we go, can you share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about what you're up to?
Sure. I have 4 websites, but the website, the website I'll share with you today is bernadettesmith.com.
Nice.
So you can check that out. I'm also on LinkedIn and all of the other social medias, not to be confused with Bernadette Smith, the dating coach. That's not me.
Okay. All right. I'll make the distinction in the show notes for sure. Yes. All right. Well, Bernadette, thank you so much again for being on the show. I always learn a ton from you, and I hope that everyone who's tuning in right now has something to take away from our conversation. And for the Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It's always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring bosses like Bernadette. So as a next step, consider subscribing to the podcast, leave a rating and review. That really helps get the podcast known and out there to the world. And definitely share the show with a friend or a loved one if you think it's going to help them. And as always, please keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.